Okay, hello again. I've got ready to start painting the rocks now. Um, I want to tell you a few things that I did for maintenance. My spirits jar was a little bit on the green-yellow side, and I decided to just set that aside, seal it back up, cover it, and let the pigment settle out of it. Then I usually pour off the cleaner liquid into a new jar. But in the meantime, I decided to make a new jar of spirits so that I don't mix up green into my rocks. Now, it's sometimes a good thing to have colors bouncing off into other things like this, but right now I just want to try to get some gray rocks in here, and I can worry about throwing in other pieces of reflecting and things like that right now. So I'm doing something a little bit different here. I'm going to show you my palette. So I have a white, which is the Gamblin Flake White replacement we spoke about, and then I have a pinky color. I'm not really going to mention brand names here because the bottom line is you should always buy the best paint that you can actually afford and work with that, because the pigments are stronger for one, and second of all, you struggle a lot if you end up buying really poor paints because they don't give you the result that you're expecting. So you're really better off not saying, let me just work with the cheap paints until I can make money to sell something. Really go for what is quality as much as you possibly can, and then go from there. So this is a pink, sort of along the lines of alizarin crimson or maybe a rose madder, I think it might have been. Anyway, here's a purple. And this is a black, only the tube says it's a soft black, and I was kind of curious if I would like that, because typically I'm used to painting with either Mars black or usually ivory, depending on what layer you're in and who different teachers have had said, oh, Mars is the underlayer and ivory's the over, and other people say it's the opposite. I'm going to try this. So what I find is that black and white mixed together gives me a gray that is way too cold for most of the things that I want to do. And I could mix a piece of umber into it, except that I really started looking at this picture here, the reference. Okay, ein Moment. And I see it more as a cold and a blue, especially contrasting with his skin. So I decided I'm going to go with these because this is a cold red, and purple and pinks are kind of interesting. They can be cold or they can be red. But the thing is, I mean, cold or warm. The thing is, everything is in context of stuff. So I've had this thing in my head lately of wanting to put a little purple in places in paintings for some reason. And I'm also, again, trying to grow the idea of being a little more sophisticated on my color palette. Even though to me this is sort of kind of babyish still, but I'm gonna go for it because the rocks are fairly simple, but they're also probably Pietra Serena, which is a gray sandstone. I don't think that they're that, but they seem... It could be, because they seem more along the lines for what I've been carving up in Tuscany here. So this is what I'm going to do. And you'll notice the other thing I did differently. I actually did mix some lighter tones. Not too much, because, I don't want to break my lazy streak. But I know that these two colors here, as they come out of the tube, they're way too dark and they're way too strong, because I'm wanting to do very subtle play of color of warm and cold. And that's not going to serve me. I also know I'm not going to need a lot of black in this rock. I'm going to need grays. So I mixed one and then I mixed another, but I'll probably end up having a dab and and all that, and then I'll go back to my habit of mixing on the canvas. So let's get started with this and see how this goes. I put a few samples up here of the pink. Really, after I mixed it, I just thought, let me take the palette knife and clean it off and see how I feel about this stuff. But also I was trying to decide if I should use the palette knife to put in the rocks, because I was thinking that rocks have a different texture. His skin is going to be very soft. The rocks are going to be they're chunky, but also there's spaces where they're crumbling. And when you have rocks in the river, of course, you're going to have water entering there, and it's going to split these things. And so you're going to have these different exposed layers, and then you're going to have algae growing on things and all the cracks and crags and all this stuff. So I wanted to maybe think of having a contrast between the soft skin of him, and the leaves would be a third level of texture as well as color. I think perhaps I could go too much in this, because if I made this really, really contrasty and this really, really smooth, and then of course this is in the background and it's already got soft edges, what will end up happening is the rocks become the star of the show and you can forget about the little boy. So we'll see how this goes, but I can always scrape things off if I end up deciding it's too chunky. But so let's do something here. I made this too exaggerated, this when I painted in the background here. So that's because I know I've mentioned in other videos that stand back and take a look at the work and what bugs you the most. Whatever bugs you the most, go fix that first. And you find that that ends up saving you a lot of trouble in the end. Okay, and I don't necessarily like that, so I'm going to soften it again. I could use a paintbrush to do this as well, but I didn't. I really like finger painting. It was kind of a disaster when I was a street painter because I was always touching everything, and that just meant I was one of the dirtiest artists in the street. But, you know, it was a good conversation starter with the tourists, I suppose. Alright, so I see that underneath his bum it's going to be this kind of a light gray. And I'm mixing it with the white that I just put on at the edge there. I do want the sun is coming from back here in here. You can see the way that it hits the top of his thigh here, so it's going to be more vertical. And it also is hitting this side of the leg more, so it's all, you know, or this side of the arm, so it's also coming here. So more than likely it's between 11 and 12 o'clock kind of thing. And again, I'm not copying to the letter of the law the stone, but I do obviously want to be looking at a stone to see what qualities are stone-like. And at this point, I'm trying to pretty much just trust my drawing as far as the shape and stuff, and focusing on filling it in, but in a very decisive manner. If I'm putting a light gray on, I want to look where are the places where I have a light gray and put that in there. I can see that maybe that's a little too dark. And it's weird that I'm saying things like it's a little bit too dark, because the fact is, again, without the relationships of the other things, I could be quite mistaken on what is too dark. And then this ends up going, so adjusting the drawing as I see that I'm looking at this triangular shape here. It's not really a triangular shape that ends here. It ends more down here as this rock kind of goes into that. So I'll pull this back down here. And I am sort of flattening it out. I'm not trying to, I kind of like this because what it's given me softer blends where I have more of the tone in there than I might with a paintbrush. And I find that that's kind of exciting because again, I can scrape it off and yet I still have a wee bit of pinks in there, and then, you know, that sort of thing. Okay, so the nice thing about a palette knife is it's very easy to wipe off and clean off if you want to change from light tone to a dark tone to a warm. Instead of having thousands of palette knives, you can just scrape it off and go. Oh, another thing I was going to tell you is I also put my paper towel into my fireplace, because once it has a lot of medium and spirits on it, you don't want to place it in the garbage can. It's really, really unhealthy to do that, and it can cause a spontaneous combustion. So it's quite a big danger thing. I usually lie them out in a safe place, but my fireplace is the safest place, because if it does spontaneously combust, obviously I'm in a place that can deal with fire, but also fire is fun, so sometimes I just want to torch them up right then, just to woohoo, watch it go. But otherwise, I just lay them on top of the things there, and even if it's summertime, at least it's in a safe place. I can lay, you don't want to ball them up like this and put them in to anything. You want to spread them all out again, use it to wash off your hands if it's not that dirty and that kind of thing. But make sure you don't leave that liquid where it's all inside, because inside it starts this little thing, you know. And okay, so I'll keep going on this. I do wish that I had a place to hang this up, because that's annoying to have to hold on to it. So maybe I'll just put that here for a bit. Alright, I find because everything here is fairly light, I want to go ahead and put some darks in there. And the dark would be a good place to maybe add a wee bit of purple, just to make it not be a pure black. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. And also your shadows tend to be, that's a pretty soft black. It's more like a deep, deep charcoal. But you know this is going to be a high K painting, so it may actually work in my favor here. Now this, I do find with palette painting, you need a lot more paint on your canvas, and I find for the way that I paint, that's always a struggle for me to mentally get into taking that off and doing it. Okay, so I'm going to correct my shape as I go, and I see this a little bit further back here. See, I just don't have enough paint on there. And this is kind of going in an arch down into this point here. So I see a sliver of white. Yeah, that's okay. And this has a diagonal, and I'm going to get a little bit lighter in here. So the diagonal, and again, what the thing is funny is that I'm enlarging this, so I always have to keep that in mind when I'm making my relationships, because otherwise I tend to, whoa, look at that. Okay. So I'm cheating here, so I'm obviously not using the whole palette knife thing. I don't like clocks that make that much noise. I find them distracting. I don't want to be thinking about a clock right now. Mixing a little bit of purple into the black again as I go in and do the shadows. And I see that there's a nice, as the water slaps up against the rock, there's a brightness there, but there's a dark line that separates where the rock, before the rock gets immersed totally into water. And it's not going to be perfectly straight. I may have the basic angle. It's not going to be super crooked. I mean, it depends on the form of the rock, of course, but let's go in a bit here, curve down, and then let's come back down again. It is really nice, actually. The stairs built up in this way. I don't want to like it too much because I want to use my studio at some point. It's just I moved in here for the winter time and typically do that because I don't want to deal with gas and electricity, and gas in Italy is quite expensive. And when I saw my bill this December or January, whatever it was, I decided no more. No more. For guests maybe, but not for me. Just pull everything into the bedroom. Okay. This I can see. I need to pull this down. But I'm looking at the relationship of this and this. So this I need to actually pull down here. I feel awkward with it because I like palette knife paintings, but it's strange because when I'm doing it myself, I feel that I don't have that same connection that I like with that. I like the feeling that, like with sculpture, I can do hands-on. I'm touching what I'm working with, and here I'm not getting that same sort of feel. Mix a little bit of lighter coloring with that purple. And this may be an opportunity. Woohoo, look at that. Oh, that's kind of cool. Alright, so underneath his bum, you end up having a dark space coming down out of that, of the rock. And it curves around this way, doesn't it? It doesn't really look like a shadow. It really looks like it just happens to be the rock. Had a breakage there of some sort. And then I'm going to carry this down, and I see that there's a lighter gray up against the water there, and then it pulls down in. Because you do need to, the quality, if you can, yeah, I'm sure you can imagine, because you're watching this video, you know something about painting and just life in general, but it's an interesting thing to paint the difference between a soft, yielding flesh and a hard, craggy rock with pits and imperfections and broken pieces and stuff. So, alright, I'm not sure I want to go too much darker into that. And again, I want to step back because my gut says that I'm going to look at this and go, oh my gosh, that's really contrasty. So let's have a look. Yeah, it's, you know, not as bad as I thought, but okay, so I think what I'm going to do is put a wee bit of this pink in here, and dirty that up with some of that gray, and let's make this maybe, that's a blue. I want to keep the pink on the lighter side of things, so I'm just going to throw some of that in here for some reason. I may not like that at all, and I may take it out, but for right now, I'm kind of interested in how that's going here. So, alright, and this, let's get the lighter, it's closer to his bum area to imitate that. See, I don't have enough paint on this knife. Okay, and then there's sort of a flat panel there. For me, that's what's so exciting about the palette knife is that, okay, I want to warm up this color a little bit, and instead of adding an umber as I would normally do, that would make it go in a brown direction, I want to keep it all kind of a light and pink. But see, I like how this is not smoothly covering everything, although some part of me thinks I'm trying to undo it for some reason. The other thing is I keep wanting to add blue in there, and it may be, actually, let me use this cobalt blue, but I think I had a nicer, kind of a more of a turquoisey. Let's see if this is more of a cyan blue than a particularly cobalt. Yeah. Need my candle trick here. Okay, and a little dab will do ya. Let's mix in some more of this white with a wee bit of the blue. Okay, it's too strong, as I should have guessed it would be. And put more white in my source material. Please send questions to me and comment on the video. Like it, share it, subscribe to the channel if you can. I would like to be helpful with these things, and I don't really know what it is people want, other than people telling me that we just want to see what makes you tick. Where do you get your ideas from? How do you pull them off? And what are all the things you're thinking about when you're doing stuff like that? I thought I would try this out, but it would help to say, hey, why did you do this, or why did you do that, or did you know that when you said right you meant left, because I do that a lot. But yeah, let's get an interaction going here if you can. I'm, interested in that. But leave a comment in there and share it with your friends if you like. Thank you. I'm going to keep going here. So I've got the blue. Can you see that color? Yeah. And like I said, it's quite strong. I almost feel like I'm getting an Easter palette here because look how pretty. I just need some greens and yellow. Oops, goodness. Gotta learn how to do that. There, is that no glare there? Okay. So yeah, I'm mixing, but they're all these little pastel-y colors, and that's kind of weird, isn't it? So as I go over here, I want to get just whatever blue is on the palette knife, because I just want a hint. See, this is more, let's see if I can hold this up here. Do you see this down here it's a blue or gray, almost just a blue with white, but it does have a little bit of this stuff mixed into it. But do you see the very, very big difference in all these things? So I'm going to hope to make more. I like the blue that was coming in here. See, and now see if I wouldn't overmix, it would probably have worked out better because now I've got purple mixed in there. So I think I like this. Yeah. So, now the other thing is, again, I'm more interested in tone than I am in the color. So if I can get those relationships of tone started, I can come in later and get more of these fine-tuning things for the things that I'm doing. Don't necessarily want it. Like I said, I don't necessarily want it. But do you see that the other thing is the palette knife is going to lend me into sharp edges. Unless I, either take a finger to soften them or soften them some other way. Now here I'm going to want to put in a few, break up some of this dark in here. Because it shows that the form is changing on the rock. It's craggy, and it's going to have light wanting desperately to go into any little place that it can find to go into, because that's what light likes to do, isn't it? And it describes the form for us, so it's wonderful for us as well. I don't want that to go that deep down in there. Okay, and then kind of come back in here. Okay, so I have a gray line that goes up into that, and I want to wipe this off and go back into this nice soft white, bluish white that I've done to do some of these pieces here. And again, I'm not following the letter of the law of this rock. However, I am trying to follow it quite closely, because if I don't, then I end up making it up myself. And the thing is, one of the joys of being an artist is to watch what's actually happening in the world and note its elegance and its beauty and its form, and to look at the grand design of things, which is quite nice. So yeah, I need to keep wiping off and come in with a new clean pigment again. So let me put this shape into here. And I'm getting a little bit too white. I want to add a little bit more blue into this. So I think the blue is quite pretty. But another problem is, part of the reason I'm seeing blue is the green reflected in there, but a lot of it has to do with the photographic process and how it was dealing with things in shadow. So as long as I don't get too carried away with that, I won't necessarily end up having with something with photo representation. I just really don't find the tightness of that interesting. Which I realize is funny, because people often tell me, oh, your work looks just like a photograph. Oh, thanks. Okay, this is, I'm gonna, on the shadow side of the rock. So I need to remember that the form always has to take precedence. And that means that my shadow side is going to be darker than the side in light. That's a bit of the definition of shadow, isn't it? Okay. Here's another contradiction. I told you at the beginning of the painting I don't like to hold the palette because I have enough stuff that I'm trying to pay attention to. And now you see me holding the palette. I think part of it is because I'm only working with one palette knife and not a bunch of brushes. Okay, so that's a little bit darker. And I want to curve that around here. And I want to keep it looking like the shape of a rock. So I'm going to have more angular pieces in here. And then this will of course go even darker as it gets into the shadow. So it makes a wee bit of black into there, maybe a little bit of purple, although purple's going to be warm, so maybe I know I kind of like the purple, but maybe I'll put a wee bit more blue in there too. Just to make sure that the purple's a cool purple. And get that in here. So the thing I find interesting about the palette knife, and maybe it's my lack of experience on it because I've only just started sort of seriously using it. I love looking at palette knife paintings, but don't get to try things as much as I want to, partly because I'm so slow in production. I don't feel I have the freedom to for the time I have. But I like them and find them interesting in a very kind of organic way, but they're fun to work with. But also I don't have a control for where I feel like it's going to hit. And so that's an interesting thing but you know, I feel that way a little bit about pastels too, because it's not like a piece of charcoal that you sharpen to a fine point or anything. It's okay. I went upwards in that direction because I'm trying to keep this line here, see, so that you feel like this is actually behind all of that. So it's time to step back and take another look at how this is going. Right now when I'm looking at it, I'm trying not to look at the reference material. I want to see, does that actually look like a rock? And it's not a bad start, but I think I can do better a little bit. So one thing I felt like that is too dark compared to this, and I want to give some connection to it. As you can see with there's some rock shapes of this, the lighter section of this rock is going in here, and then it's going into, it's doing this big white shape, whatever it is that makes that section of white. I think maybe it's this, the dark is actually probably rock that's popped off. So anyway, you see shapes here, and again wipe this off and then go for some other. I do want to remember this is going into the shadow, and I don't know with the palette knife because how much of it, see, look at that, how much is going to blend in with what's already there, and I don't necessarily want too much paint there either, so I think that's going to be okay for now. And what it could be is that I end up allowing this to dry. I don't want that to be there. And what I also want is a dark underline, but I think I can pull that off when what I've got here is dried a wee bit. And squinting. Squinting shows you so much because it's a way to simplify things for your vision, so you can judge relationships much better. I'm going to put in a wee bit of light into this tone here to separate it. And it gets fatter as it goes in here, this shape. because again, I don't want to just outline everything. Okay. And this needs some more tone development. Do you see that? It's just the one, two tones don't really make dimension. I think you really need, it gives you an idea of what's happening, but it doesn't give you an illusion. So I want to get a lighter gray into this. That's not really lighter. I'm going to light with purple with it, which is mixed with white. Okay, that might be a workable deal. And also, I forgot to mention, you noticed that oh blimey, my perspective is off. I'm looking down on this rock instead of over at this rock. So something, what did I do not so good? Actually, this rock needs to come out here more. Okay. Does that make sense, what I just saw? Maybe not. If I've put the original for reference up where you are. So, okay. So that's going to be a little bit darker as it curves into this here. I've got too much dark on that knife. Okay. Go in with this lighter. Let this curve around. Kills. When you put the light on, it's really easier to start into the light section, but when you have a full thing of paint, and pull it into where you have less paint, and you can get a nice graduation that way. If you start out the opposite way, you just put light into your dark, and you're going to be pulling in darks into your light, so you didn't really help yourself. Alright, so now I need to pull in some and extend this. Because this needed to be thinner here. If it's not thinner going to nothing, it gives me the impression that I'm looking down, seeing both sides of the top of this rock. Okay? So what I really wanted to do is I need to be looking side at this rock. I can still see the top plane, but I need this more to curve up that way. So I look here, I have a very slender sliver, and actually it's overlapping it at the very end. You see, I just don't have control. I've got to use just the tip of that. And this curve will go straight down into here and be fairly horizontal at that point. And sometimes, okay, so now I want to look at where that crease hits, is where his bum is starting to go up a little bit. And it's more than halfway, okay, which is kind of what I've got there. And the crease here is where this ends. So what I want to do is make sure that I get this creeping arch up here to change it where I'm looking at more of the side of the stone and not so much the top of it. And then I'm going to pull the direction because I see that's where the light is coming is. And this goes back here. This actually comes up more dark going down there. Okay, so I need to put... Now, the other thing is I'm going to be mixing a little bit of white into this black, so because black is a transparent color. And I don't want at some point for this to come through as anything else. Okay, and then let's see if it makes it too dark, but I want to pull in just a dark right along the edges in here. Instead of a soft black, I want to... Okay, it's not going to release. So I'm going to wait, and I'm going to add this dark, dark, dark later, and then I can decide how much of that goes into the water and how much of that is right at the edge of the base. See these little chunks here, so I'm going to push that out because I had enough paint to do that. Let's step back and look at this again. I kind of don't mind that this is a sharp edge because it's closer to us. However, rocks are in, especially a rock in a river, is really not going to have a sharp edge like that. So this, I think I can refine the shape. So right now, yeah, let me go ahead and not leave that. I want to leave this as an angle here, showing that this is actually the water. So I can push this, because this will have a little bit of a shadow in the water. But these are all details, but I do want to be thinking about them and not leave them. This edge will be more difficult. Maybe what I need to do is take... Oh, I have a great brush, hang on. This lovely little red brush, my friend Llewellyn bought at Zecchi's in Florence for me for my birthday one year, and I love it. I use it for a lot of things. So at this point, now I'm going to brace my arm against here because I need to touch the actual art or what supports the art so that I know exactly where I am. A lot of people use a mole stick for it, but in this case, I need to put my elbow here, or I usually use my pinky to rest things here. My hands this time are fairly clean, and this is not such a thick paint that it's going to be a mess. If I put my finger here, I'm just asking for trouble. But I want to go along and just softly remove paint to right at the edge there, to soften that edge. I don't want to change the shape so much. I think I'm probably happy with the shape as it is. I just want to mix, and what I'm really doing is mixing a little bit of the light tone with a little bit of the dark tone. And it's not the same as giving me a soft, soft, soft edge, because if that were true, I would mix the tone between this one and that one and put in a third tone, and then that would really soften it. But it's a rock, and I want to keep it kind of hard, but I don't want to make it really, really hard, especially because right now this is physically more paint than I have on the canvas. I don't want it to grab too much attention away. Okay. So, yeah, it's removing material, and I'm going to push this dark out, maybe even put a wee bit of dark on my pen, because this is a great opportunity, since I have the brush with control, to go over and refine a few of the things that I want to get figured out there. But I don't want too much paint on the brush, because then I'm going to end up destroying perhaps what I've just done with the palette knife, and that would be kind of silly, considering the whole point of what I'm doing with that is to learn something new. Okay, so I'm pull this down. I'm looking at the shape here. It's not a straight line. It's actually kind of curving in this way. So actually, let me put a little bit of light. I want to curve this curve around down here. And I'm trying to keep my strokes where I'm not being super, super tight with things. I want to give you the impression of stuff, but I don't need to spell it all out, because your brain is smart. You're gonna see how it all comes together and works out. I'm just trying to help you understand an illusion visually, because obviously I'm not sculpting these three rocks here. I'm painting 3D objects onto a two-dimensional surface, and that's the definition of an illusion, perhaps. Okay, so put that into there. See, dirty brush got mixed in with stuff. Okay. And I'm going to ridge and paint. And I'm going to also remove some of this very lightly. I love the mixture that I'm getting in here. What I don't know if I really want is to have these high ridges sticking out to catch as much light. Some of it is going to be good, but I want to do him soft and delicate and smooth, and in that case I don't believe that that will serve me to have the rocks, as I said before, overly contrasty. Pull in some of that. So I'm getting rid of some of the higher ridges of paint that I see. And again, this being in shadow, I don't need to concern the lighter parts of this rock, if I haven't done it well. They don't need to be perfect because it's in the shadow. I can add the light tones to it later, not worry about, oh, it's going to go transparent and it's going to be obvious that I did it wrong and the blah blah. Pentimento is what the Italians call it. It's the idea of the sins of the fathers. It means what you've done in the past comes back to bite you in the arse when you're not really thinking about it. You haven't prepared for it. You didn't really believe that what you did was so horrible that you're going to pay till the end of eternity. Pentimento. Okay, and so let's get that. And it's okay. I want the feeling of soft water lapping up onto this. I'm going to soften this edge to give me somewhere to go. Okay, I'll kind of leave this. Here's a little ridge poking up out of this. And I don't mind the ridges on the highlights as much as you do in the shadow. Transitions are your great place to show off things. What I mean by that is transition is where your excitement happens. It may not feel like excitement when you're going through it, let me tell you, but I want to get a little bit lighter. Put into that. Whoa, well, this is really a thick kind of paint, isn't it? Okay, see there I softened the edge when I smoothed it, but I'm happier with that shape there because it's a change, but it's not super dramatic. Don't really like drama to a point. I mean, okay. Now I can put in a wee bit. It could be that this flake white replacement is what's feeling sticky at this moment. I'm looking at the dark here that goes right under the crease of his leg here. So we'll pull this in as the dark shadow. And again, that's a rock, so I don't want to make it too sweet and archy. Alright, so that also means... And you'll notice there are some parts of the canvas I haven't covered. I'm cool with that for the moment. Okay, so let's do that. Let's pull this down here in this sort of way. Alright. And get rid of some of this. Okay, so give me a minute to reevaluate and figure out what I'm doing here and see if I like where it's going or if I want to take it another direction. And I'll keep painting rocks after that, and we'll see you in a bit. Thanks. Oh, Borsheimarts.com. You can also visit me at Patreon/Kelly Borsheim, YouTube/user/Kelly Borsheim. Not that I'm a user, but you know, it sounds bad, doesn't it? Okay. Like the video, share the video, give me some comments, give me some questions. Really love it. Thank you for watching. And this is Lollipop. We did the background at the last time, and I may have done some of this off the video, but I spent the last time doing a couple of these rocks and then showing you I was going to continue all this. So I don't know if you can see this, and I need a new camera right now. This is my phone, and I'm not really good at holding the phone and doing a video. It seems like too much movement. But I did take a couple of still photos, and I'll show you the texture of this rock. here. For example, this is how my palette ended up looking towards the end. I know we were speaking about the palette before, so you can see I've mixed a little bit up. I didn't use as much pink as I thought I might, but I have a feeling that because I'm going to have pink, probably leave the pink of the Lollipop in there, that I may throw in some more of this stuff. And again, I want to do some color continuity type of things in this idea. But piano piano, as we say in Italy, let's go slow with this because things develop as they go along. So because of the nature of rocks are hard and chippy and sharp, and yet river rocks are going to be rounded a bit, you know. So there's the qualities of this, but they're different from a soft flesh or a leaf that's blowing in the wind kind of thing. So I chose to use the palette knife. This particular one is just a small triangular, or what am I saying? Yeah, it's a triangle, but rounded edges. But it's one of the smaller palette knives that I have. I don't know why I chose this one, except it was the one I found. I like the palette knives, we can see here, that actually have a bend in it here. I do have one or two that are straight across, just kind of like a butter knife, but I don't find that they give me the mixing ability as much. Somehow this going down into it like a pie pan thing, I find much more useful to this. And I like the bigger handle because you want to be able to get a grip on things. So that's it about this. And of course, you know, these guys are a little flexible thing that kind of helps you whip things around to mix it up pretty well. And I don't mix my paint super thoroughly because as I said before, I really enjoy having these sort of little surprises into things. I want to mix it thoroughly enough so that it's going to be hopefully similar to the same tone no matter where I put it. But I also even don't find that to be that much of a problem because in the end, if I swish something there and I don't like all the different colors that are happening in it, I just pick out what I want and then kind of use a soft brush and blend it all in together, and then you don't notice what I had done. If I end up liking it, that it's a happy little surprise I couldn't have done any other way or would have been a lot more work to do. Somehow this swishing things is quite nice. So I'm going for a paper towel. Okay. So the thing is, I did this, and now I've been working on another painting for an hour or two, and I've been looking at this from a distance on the other side of the room. As I work on this one thing, I'll look up, and because this is the way the brain works for me, a lot more happens in my head than ever happens on the canvas. So I have to decide what I like or not, and I'm seeing a lot of glare in this underline here. Now, I did all the rocks. I mean, this rock is angled toward me and stuff, but all the rocks that I'm looking at sort of face on, they've all got to be horizontal with the dark line, you know, the shape. It doesn't have to be a straight horizontal rock. It can have a jut part here. This is part of the river that's there, for example, and it goes around this way. But in general, the water's going around. From my point of view, it's going to be horizontal here. Even here, I've got it horizontal. And this, I ended up lowering it on my drawing as I'm trying to straighten up my stuff here. So my main question is that once I did this, I thought, I really like it. It's cool. I really like this texture. And I know that I have to develop some more to get the information here properly, but I'm kind of fascinated by this whole thing of this really chunky texture that's not normally my thing, but I'm digging it. So the problem is that I know that when I go in and put him in, he's not going to be chunky like this unless maybe I should try it, but I don't know. Right now my thing is, do I want to keep this or do I not want to keep this? What I ended up doing a minute ago was these rocks that are in the distance, you're not going to see the high chunk on them, technically speaking, because they're further away. So I decided that while the paint is still kind of, well, it is still wet, the thing that was sidetracking me is what I'm really deciding with this Gamblin Flake White substitute is that it's sticky. I'm so used to painting with paint that sort of flows and it goes where I want it to go and when I want it to do it. Now with this stuff is almost like painting with honey, if you can imagine such a thing. it's thick for sure, but it's a different feel in the hand, and I haven't decided what I think about it yet. So anyway, but okay, so let me put down this. So I went through with a soft brush. Might have even been this bristle brush, but because I've got chunky paint here, and I'm going to actually pull this down because I don't like. I'm thinking that this must be some of the oils that are mixed in the tube, because right now I'm not using any medium since this is the first layer on the wood. But I don't want this oily stuff to stay around there because I find that that's a distraction. It's going to be a glareful thing. Now notice that I'm lightly wiping, and after each time I'm cleaning the brush off. Otherwise, every time I dab in, I'm going to put black paint back onto this thing. Don't want to do that. But what I really do want to do is soften the general feel of this. Now, the other thing is, I know that, whoops, see, I'm pulling it this way, and I can see from the light up above that I'm going to have these ridges like this that are seeing the light, unseeing the light, so I'm going to use the technique of the fan brush, but it's not actually a fan brush, and I'm going to pull this vertical down, because if the grooves are going this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, you're still going to see a lot less distraction than you would if they were horizontal, because the light source is usually at the top. And so I'm really also hoping to get rid of some of the oiliness of that, and that might go away in a little bit with it, but. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to knock down the physical texture that's sticking out and will catch light, but yet I don't want to get rid of the chunkiness that happened with the laying down of the palette knife, because I find that kind of interesting. So it's always a hard call to make on how much to do, but the more you do it, the better you get on your touch as far as whether something's effective. First of all, I mean, you have to be pushing onto the canvas enough to actually be removing paint, because really that's what a fan brush is doing. It's softening, but the real thing is it's removing the high textures and things like that. So I think for now that's okay to use. The one thing that's really good about painting on wood is that it's a non-flexible surface. So that means that your paint has a much more stable thing than you can imagine. A canvas is going to be whoo whoo whoo, however kind of things go, and that's not always to your benefit. So I like painting on the wood. I like it that it pushes back at me, and I don't know what the deal is, but when I also go to museums, a lot of the pieces that I find myself drawn to are painted on wood. Some of them are painted on copper, but they're all a hard surface, and so I've just decided that when I have the ability to, that's what I want to paint on. Okay, so right now, again, I want to decide, do I leave this chunk? The problem is that as sticky as this paint is, I know that even if I waited until tomorrow to make up my mind, this would be really hard. And then at that point, it's a scraping off, a fighting hard thing. And do I want to do it? I don't know. The problem is that when something is new, your habitual brain sort of says, I don't really know. It's not my thing. I don't know what to do with it. And then the other part of you says, I kind of like it, but is it because it's different or because it's really good? Or, so, but I am the woman with two brains, and the logical one and the emotional one, and I can fight with myself about all this stuff and go around and around and around in circles. So I think at this point, I do like this, but I'm a little concerned that I'm not going to make him chunky, and even this doesn't match that. I don't even think that I like these colors together, because this is very dramatic and contrasty, and this is more of a soft, subtle thing, but I don't think I like these colors here together. And I was thinking that it's a bit funny, because here I told you about the beginning of the process, how I did this color study so I could figure it out and have a plan, and I'm not actually following those color studies. they really should have been studies, and they, in fact, they probably were for me, is studies in the contrast, not necessarily the color. Because also I knew that the color that I have in my pastels are a little bit different from what I had here, and I was really just trying to exaggerate something because, I don't know, I don't have the patience to do things twice, as I said before. So, but I find that something's going to change on this painting to make these colors more interesting together to me. Right now I don't have a feel for it, but also some part of me feels like, okay, I listen to this part of my gut feeling on it, and I feel, okay, I'm not really pleased with this. However, it's too early for me to really make a judgment on this. I need to put in what I decide to make as the skin tones, because, you know, you've got a whole bunch of those you can work it with too. And once I get that in, I may or may not need to put this in to understand it, but it could be that I'll start, once I get the skin in, this will be really, really green, and I'll think, no, I don't think so. And it'll come about. I already know that my personal bias is against a lot of the cold palettes that I see a lot of my colleagues using. And it's not a statement against them. It's a statement of how I emotionally respond to various colors. And I see a lot of things that are what I would call pasty. They don't make me have a good, happy feeling. They don't need to. It's like that film Twilight with the vampires, I think it was. It was all filmed in the cold, fluorescent, cold blues and everything, blue greens that just gave the impression of ill health. So that's the kind of palette that I don't really want to use. And when you add a lot of white into things, it's natural for the color to go colder. And so anyway, right now I'm going to take my little brush here, and I'm going to very, very lightly blend in some of this texture so that I'm not committed. I know that if I really want to, I can go back in later and chunk it up again. And I realize that's not a verb. But, so, again, I'm hoping you can see this. I really need to get a new camera so that I have a zoom ability and have the ability to take a few stills. I tried to take stills with this with that iPhone, and I have to say that I'm not particularly impressed with the focus of macros, and I really enjoy close-up kind of things. So I'm a little bit worried this black is not going to be, it's not rock-like. Alright, so especially in the shadow areas first, I want to knock down the highlights so that the high ridges, not the highlights. Going in a vertical stroke again. I don't mind that line there being so sharp, but here's the other thing is I sort of had laid in this water color. I can totally see that once I got the rocks in, this is way, way, way too light. I hope that makes sense to you. So again, it's all about relativity things, and this is okay because I was really just using up old paint that day and didn't have enough pigment to make it darker, but even then I was still wanting a contrast and keeping the light, here it is, and you know, it's okay to do these things. Now this one didn't look very rock-like because I did too many short choppy things with mixtures that didn't really give a rock effect, so that was kind of, let's just get my knee, hosted my knee up here. And some of these rocks will eventually be covered by foliage. Because when I designed the foliage, I wasn't entirely sure which ones I was going to keep and which, so I ended up painting into them a bit, and I'm doing the same with the rocks. I want to make sure that when I paint the leaves over the rocks that I don't leave any background. This looks like it could be a hole in some leaves that I probably should have done some watercolor, meaning not watercolor, the material water, the subject matter in this piece. Okay. I'm going to save this one for last because right now I like it and it's also mostly in the foreground. So I'll go back down here to the background. And something was wrong on that proportion. No, most of it is down here. Okay. One thing I don't want to do compositionally is I don't want to take this shape. This is his back here, and that's a leaf, and then his arm. I don't want to take the shape of this rock here and make this little dip right there straight in the middle, because a lot of symmetry stuff deadens our eye to travel. So this here is wider than that, and that makes something a little bit of variety and interest. Okay. Waited too long on some of this, but really it probably just is a matter of pushing down a little harder. I wanted to wait before I did this so that it had a better chance of staying with the interesting color mixtures that I have going on, and I just want to come off later and wipe off the tops. If I did it too early, I was a little worried that as I wipe things off, I would be blending it too much, and I would take out some of that interesting, exciting kind of mixtures that I had done right on the board. And I want to remember where my light source is, because this dark tip of, first of all, this dark tip is not part of this triangular rock here, so I kind of don't like how I made that even. And let's see if I can see this reference here. That happens to be something I don't see in the reference because it's not really there so much. So I think what I'll do is pull a little bit of dark. What I want is not to make it look like a tripod where the shadow of this rock is actually finishing the front. It may not bother you, but it's something that I find is kind of a sign that I'm contriving too much, and I want to get something a little bit more. It could naturally happen, but I just feel like it looks too much like I'm trying too hard, and I don't like really when two things meet up like that, it's called a kiss, and in this case, kisses are not really desirable. Okay, and also as I get further away from the canvas, I want to really have a lot less contrast going on. I don't want my eye running off of the round thing. So as I mush these together, I'll just go ahead and do my thing. Again, I have the knowledge that I can come back and second paint a lot of this and refine it. You know, one problem is it would be a nice goal to only do second painting and not get into this, well, I'm going to repaint, and I'll just go around and around and around and around and around forever. It's wonderful if you really are glazing a lot of tones and you can have that sort of thing, but practically speaking, it doesn't really allow you to get much done, does it? Okay. I tried to follow the rule of the sun coming this way, not just, and you know, looking at a reference, which I agree is a bit of, it's not really cheating, but you know, it just makes life easier, doesn't it? It's not straight out of my imagination, this scene. However, it's good to pay attention to those things because sometimes And I find that I don't see everything in the model that I need to see to be able to create, to emulate the look that's in there. Because really, for example, if you have a 3/4 face portrait and you can't see the distant corner of the eye, and you know, you're wondering what's all that going on in shadow there, if you can reproduce the same thing that you see, even though what you see is not necessarily what's there, you're doing a fine job with the illusion. The problem is that it's that confusion that makes it difficult for us to mentally try to put something in there, because we don't really understand what it is we're looking at. And so it's difficult to just say, well, I've got a blob there, and I've got a blob there, and I've got a blob there. At some point, that to me is one of the best uses of building on the idea of drawing what you see with studying anatomy to add what you know is gonna happen. And it just makes for me, it makes a better experience, and it's more intelligent in that sense, and I like that a lot. Okay, and now this is a piece of foliage, so what I want to do is make sure that I remove any kind of texture here. And actually, probably foliage is going to be lighter than the color I've got there, so I'm going to go ahead and take some spirits and wipe that baby out. It doesn't have to be totally back to the white Campitura, but it needs to be lighter than this dark that I'm trying to contrast it with, that I'll put in later. Otherwise, they've got one part of the leaf that's fighting the other, and that's not really fun. Okay. Let's do this one before I sign off for you. I really appreciate feedback, whether you want to give it publicly or privately on the many ways that you can reach me online. But the public thing is nice, because my experience is that if one person has the courage to ask a question about something, it's usually something that someone else would like to know as well, and just doesn't have the courage to ask, or is a shy person, or any number of things like that. And I'm quite aware of that myself. And so yeah, ask away and let your neighbor benefit from something, assuming I have an answer that would work. Okay, so I'm going to soften these edges here between. This is two different shapes, sides of the rock, and I debated about softening it, but I think if you put the shapes in the shapes are actually the most important thing if you want to identify an object. And then the tone is the most important thing if you want to have the feeling of touchability. So, first of all, I need you to believe this is a rock. Right now, I could believe that that's what I'm trying to paint here, based on the shapes that I did and the way that I applied the paint. So, like I said, I really enjoy this, but the tone will be the thing that makes the rock feel like it exists in 3 dimensions on this flat surface. So again, let me get these edges done up. So I'll stop this video for now, and I thank you for watching, and next I'll start working on the figure, I think. Okay? Thanks for joining me.